Welcome to today's lesson on methods for solving a quadratic, completing the square. So today we're going to go through the method of completing the square to solve a quadratic. So let's say that I have x squared plus 6x plus 8 equals 0. Now when completing the square, the first thing we want to look for is our middle term even? Because we have other methods for solving a quadratic. If here with the 6x, it being even, our best method is going to be certainly completing the square. That, and we want to have a first term that's a perfect square. If we have those two things, then completing the square is probably our best method for solving the quadratic. Now again, we have other methods using the quadratic formula or factoring and using the zero product property, and sometimes factoring can be easier, sometimes the quadratic formula can be easier. But in this instance, we're going to use completing the square. So here again, we want to always get our quadratic here equal to 0. That's where we want to be when we do this. So once we have that, then we can move on to our next method. All right. So now again, the term is completing a square. So what we want to do is we want to make a square. So our goal is to have one side equal another side, because in a square, this side and this side are equal. So to be able to do that, we take our x squared term and put it in one of the corners. Doesn't matter which corner, whichever corners you're most comfortable with. And then we take our middle term, 6x, and we divide it evenly in between these two. Now, that's the reason we want to have an even middle term, because it makes it the easiest. Now, it will work for an odd middle term as well. This method will work as well. But what that's going to do is it's going to give you fractions when you divide these two things up evenly. So here I'm going to have 3x and 3x. When it's even, it doesn't do that for you, right? When it's even, it puts it together easily, right? So each thing that we would have here, we have x, 3, and 3. So what that means is that we need 9 in this spot. We need a 9 in that spot. Right now we have an 8, right? So I need to get 9 here in this spot. And the way that I can do that is by adding 1. But whatever I do to one side of the equation, I have to do to the other. So we have to add 1 to both sides. So now I have x squared plus 6x plus 9 is equal to 1. Now that I have that, all right, I know I have over here x squared plus 6x equals 9. Again, we've completed a square, that this side is the same here as this side. So now I can rewrite x squared plus 6x plus 9 in its factored form. X plus 3 squared is equal to 1. And now I have some choices. Now, one of the choices we can say is, what squared is 1? Well, that's easily done in our head. All right, we know that 1 squared is 1 and negative 1 squared is 1. But the other way you can do it is you can undo it by undoing the square by taking the square root of both sides. Well, in this instance, because it's easy, we will go the easy route and do it in our head, that x plus 3 has to equal 1, or x plus 3 is going to equal negative 1. And then we just solve for x. And the way we would solve for x in this instance is add negative 3 to both sides. So I get x equals negative 2, or x equals negative 4. So now I've solved my quadratic. So I know that x equals negative 2 or x equals negative 4. So now let's go through and do the method again, but now let's go with a little bit more complicated one. Right? So let's say that I had 9x squared plus 12x minus 7 is equal to 15. One that's just a little bit more complicated as we would do this. Right, so in this instance, here I have my 9x squared. Again, the things that we're looking for is our middle term even. Here it is. And is our front term, or our x squared term, is that a perfect square? And 9x squared is a perfect square. So this puts us in a good position to use this method of completing the square. So again, I put my x squared term in trying to make my square. Put my x squared term in one of the corners, and then I divide up my middle term evenly between these two in this diagonal. So here 12x I'm going to evenly divide into 6x and 6x. Now for this to be 9x squared, that means that I have to have it the same on both sides. So I know that this is 3x and this is 3x. Again, because we have to have, for it to be a perfect square, both sides have to be the same. So now since that's 3x, I know that this is 2 and this is 2. So now I have my one side is the same as my other side. So now 2 times 2 is 4. So I need 4 in this spot. Right now I have a -7 in that spot. So how do I get 4 there? Well, add 11. So I add 11 to both sides. So now I have 9x squared plus 12x plus 4 is equal to 26. Now that I have that, now I can rewrite 9x squared plus 12x plus 4 in its factored form. 3x plus 2 squared is equal to 26. And now, when I try to do this in my head, what squared is 26? I can't do that. All right, I don't know that, and I know an estimate of it, but I don't know what it is exactly. So the only way that I can now solve this is now I have to undo the square. Well, we undo a square by taking the square root. So I have 3x plus 2 is equal to, and again, when we take a square root, we have to do plus or minus the square root of 26. So now I have 3x plus 2 equals this plus or minus the square root of 26. So now my next step, I would add a -2 to both sides. So I get 3x is equal to -2 plus or minus the square root of 26. And then I have to finish this off by dividing by 3 on both sides. So I'm going to divide this entire thing by 3. So I know that x is equal to -2 plus or minus the square root of 26 over 3. And again, this is in radical form. I can't break this down anymore to simplify this radical. So this is going to be my solution. All right. Now, if you had a calculator, you certainly could take it further than this by finding the square root of 26 and going from there. For us, this is a good exact answer for you to have on a quiz or a test. Okay, so once again, methods for completing or for solving a quadratic. This is completing the square. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to see your math teacher here at Ashwaubenon High School. Thanks.